What makes the vampires in the movie Sinners unique? So let me start with some background on this film, because there's actually quite a lot of it. So, in the 1920s, twin brothers Smoke and Stack come from Chicago to their hometown, Clarksdale, Mississippi, to open up a juke joint, which is a type of dance hall, to serve the black community. This is around 1923. The brothers got their money by robbing a bunch of gangsters. Smoke is played by Michael B. Jordan, and Stack is played by his brother. You guessed it, Michael B. Jordan. They also have a cousin named Sammy, who is played by Miles Catane, and he plays music so soulful that it draws the attention of the spirits and then the horror that comes along with it. Then there's a white guy named Remick, who is an Irish vampire, and he hears Samir's music and he is drawn to the sound and the life that it represents. He turns a KKK couple to do his bidding. So here's what I think is cool about the vampires in this movie. When the vampires gather outside the club, it is a really tense scene because there's a standoff. We can see them standing there looking in. They want to get in, but they can't get in unless they're invited. And they're sort of waiting to see if someone will be dumb enough to invite them or something like that. But I think it's interesting how these vampires are shown as more high-vlack, right? They're not just individuals. They almost seem like one being with multiple parts. They all kind of act in unison, and at times, especially when they're gathering outside the club singing and dancing, they're coming together to take over this building that belongs to this black community. And again, with the whole idea of them being a hive mind, there's also this idea that they don't have individuality. But clearly, they had individuality in some sense. The vampires in this film are definitely not like traditional vampires. Even though they share some common weaknesses like death by a stake to the heart, they sometimes start drooling, which was kinda a nice touch too. Felt different from the traditional vampires. They have more spiritual weaknesses. They can't enter without an invitation. This is why the film is called Sinners, because in order for the vampires to get into the club, they need someone to invite them. Now, this goes back to an older tradition of vampires in folklore, where they needed an invitation in order to enter a home. And it's interesting because this ties them to an idea of set dressing, that they are like guests who are not welcome. In fact, this kind of ties into the whole mythology because when they get into the club, they don't seem to drain people of their blood, they seem to drain people of their souls. There's this idea that the vampires are assimilating people into their ranks, making them part of the hive mind. This kind of ties into another aspect of the mythology because the vampires are kind of folk vampires. They're definitely tied to the land. They're native to the area. And this ties into another piece of folklore that says that vampires were sometimes bound to a particular house or piece of land. If you removed a vampire from their home territory, they would lose power. That's why Remick stays in the south. That's why they're in Clarksdale. These vampires are also deeply tied to the hoodoo traditions of the area, which is why Annie, who is played by Kian Duff, Smoke's wife, is able to fight him off with garlic juice and protective rituals and things like that. This adds to the sense that this story is firmly planted in its setting, which is great because it allows the film to feel very authentic. And there is this question as to whether or not the vampires were once human, or if they were always vampires. Now this might be just an element of horror movie history, but I couldn't help but think of the fact that vampires using folk tunes to infiltrate and lure people in is kind of similar to a minstrel show. And this kind of mirrors the idea of cultural appropriation, which is something the film is already talking about. What I mean is that these vampires are preying on the culture and the music and everything that the community has created, and they retrying to take it for themselves. The clash between Sammy and Remick is really at the heart of this film, because they represent two different worlds. Remick represents the world of white supremacy, and he represents the forces of cultural appropriation and assimilation. Sammy represents authenticity and tradition and resisting those forces. When Sammy smashes his guitar against Remick's skull, it's not just a battle between vampire and human, it's a battle between two cultures. And when Smoke finally stakes Remick, it's not just about survival. It's about preserving something special. It's not just a fight to survive. It's a fight to preserve something important. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.